Welcome to True You Ministries with pastoral counselor Stacy Echeverria. Stacy is a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught her the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. We're grateful that you've joined us for this week's broadcast. You can learn more about Stacy and her heartfelt desire to help people much like yourself who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling her at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344. Or feel free to email her at info@trueyouministries.com. And welcome to another episode of True You Ministries. How are you doing today, Stacy?
I'm doing really well today. And you, Todd?
Always good. And I feel extra blessed when I get to spend some time with you.
Aw.
Get to do some, self-reflecting after the show and during the show. And I learned so much. So
That's great.
So today's episode is about effective communication. And so that's such an important key aspect in our life in so many different ways. So this is going to be a great show, and this is actually going to be a two-parter. So this is going to be the first episode.
Right.
And effective communication. And Stacy, you're a pastoral counselor, and I know communication's key for you.
It is.
But you always like to start with a little bit of background, your background story about communications and maybe some problems you've had with this. Can you give us a little background story?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my family of origin, we were not great communicators. That was such a struggle for me. And I think too, because my mom, English was not her first language. So that was a struggle as well in learning how to understand what she wanted to communicate. And even in my own interactions with my mom, the issues that I had was never really feeling heard. It was almost as if she was waiting for me to finish so that she could speak and say something, right? But I wasn't ever heard. So that became a wounding for me. So then when I got married, well, wouldn't you know that communication was a big deal in my relationship with my husband. And I would be talking with him and he would ask me a question. And I'm thinking to myself, he's not listening, because if he were listening and heard me, he would not be asking that question, right? So when I started doing the healing work that I started a really long time ago and continue to be in it, I was able to share with him what the pain point was for me every time we would attempt to have a conversation and it felt like I wasn't being heard. I would tell him, this is such a trigger point for me. And it's a real pain point because when I believe that I'm not being heard, the message I'm getting is that what I'm saying is not important enough for anyone to listen. And so then that allowed us to have dialogue around why he is the way that he is. And he says, well, Stacy, because his mom lived with him for a long time, he took care of her and she could talk. And so he just waited for her, to say what she was saying. And he said he would just kind of zone out. And I said, okay, but I'm not your mom. And so I really do need you to hear what I'm saying, to listen to what I'm saying. And even now, almost being married 17 years, every now and again, I'm thinking I'm communicating really clear and he hears something completely different. So you really have to work at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting. He said something there about, because, a lot of times when people think about communication, they just think about talking and speaking to each other. But also a very important part of communication is listening.
Absolutely.
And so I'm sure that's something that you work with your clients about, how to listen properly, I guess is the way you would put it. So,
yeah.
It is a two-way street, right?
It absolutely is. Yeah.
And sometimes I think, in my opinion, sometimes the person listening has more power in the conversation than the person speaking, because they could just cut you off, or like you say, you could be talking to them and they're looking off into the corner. And so I know and sometimes when some of my friends, they call me and they want to just kind of dump all their problems, or just want to, and they don't really want to hear any kind of
Exactly.
solutions or any feedback. And I know
Hmm.
it kind of hurts me when I
Uh-huh.
hear them go on this long 10-15 minutes, and I try to give
Right.
some constructive criticism, and they go, yeah, but, and then just go, and I go, oh, that hurts. Like I'm trying to give you some help here. So
I know. And that's really hard when, if there's a friend where you've been hearing the same story for about
yeah,
10, 15, 20 years. And I get to a point of just wanting to say, you need to turn the record over because, you're coming to me and you're talking to me about this, but do you really want help with this? Because if you don't, then there really isn't any point in talking about it. It's just venting.
yeah,
Right. And so
yeah,
that becomes really, really unhelpful unless you're wanting change and you want to get well. There's no point in repeating the same old again. Otherwise, that is someone that is stuck in a place of being a victim.
mm,
But we do have power to change, our situation if we want to.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those just tuning in, this is True You Ministries with Stacy Echeverria. She's your pastoral counselor, and she deals with a myriad of different issues that you could be dealing with. So please reach out to her at 626-461-3344 or email info@trueyouministries.com. She's
Mhm.
really good at networking too. If it's an issue that maybe she can't help you with, she has a bunch of colleagues that she could
Mhm.
steer you towards. We've actually had a few on the show already.
Mhm.
If you've missed any of those shows, you can go to trueyouministries.com and watch some of the past episodes. We're also asking for questions from our listeners for our upcoming Q&A episode. So any questions you have on topics that we've touched on or topics we haven't, please email info@trueyouministries.com. Stacy's really looking forward to that episode and answering some of your questions. So,
Yeah.
and so you do couples counseling, is that correct?
I do. I'll counsel couples that are engaged as
Okay.
well as married. And I'll tell you this, anytime I get a call for couples counseling, it's usually around communication.
That was what I was leading to. I was wondering how many. Well, that's the main issue. But
It
that's,
is.
anytime there's any relationship, whether it be a marriage or a work relationship or any type of thing, communication is key. I mean,
Absolutely.
without effective communication, you don't get things done, whether it
No,
be a loving relationship or work done in the workplace.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Mhm.
and so yeah, so effective communication. Do you have some scriptures that you could share with us? I know you always do.
I do, I do. So James 1:19, therefore, my brothers, let every person be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. That's a real popular one. And what I love about this is that we are given two ears and one mouth, which means we need to listen more and speak
Mm,
less.
yeah,
Because sometimes we just want to say what we want to say, and we like bowl people over, and we're not really being attentive, not being present, not being connected. Like you were saying, you got some, they're looking around and
yeah.
they're not paying attention, and
Or
and
this
you know
day and age,
that.
everyone looking down at their phones, or
Oh my
that's the
gosh,
worst. You're trying to
that
have a
makes me
conversation.
crazy.
Yeah,
That makes me crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're gonna trip and fall in a minute if you don't watch where you're going.
yeah,
And then I've got Ephesians 4:29. Let no harmful language come from your mouth, only good words that are helpful in meeting the need, words that will benefit those who hear them.
mm,
So it's really when we are communicating, we really need to be intentional in communicating in a way that doesn't create any further harm or wounding or pain.
yeah,
And so that's why being an effective communicator takes work. We can communicate the depth of the pain that we're feeling or the anger that we're experiencing, but we can do it in a way that still honors the other person.
yeah.
And that's hard.
That
That can
is,
be really challenging, even for those of us that may be further along. Things happen where something comes blurting out of your mouth, and oh my gosh, you can't take that back.
hmm,
But you can recover from that. But we want to be able to be more mindful about what we're saying, how we want to communicate. And that is so much of the work that I do with
yeah,
with couples, with individuals. And really, when we consider, what can we control in life? Well, very little. But what we can control is how we speak to one another. We
Mm-hmm.
really can. We
Yeah.
can choose to be mean and horrible and rip people, to shreds if we want to. And I mean, how are you going to feel afterward? Or we can extend that love to them, speak to them in a loving way, be gracious in the way that we communicate, and still be heard in that process. We can communicate very difficult things, and
Yeah.
it can be received, but it's not so much what we're saying, it's how we're saying it. So there was this really great quote. It was in a book that I read, and it said, you can be right but wrong at the top of your voice.
Mm.
I was like, whoa, that is so true. I
Yeah.
mean, I could be right in what I'm saying, but if I'm screaming at someone, that's totally wrong.
Yeah.
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 So,
And it's that negative or screaming or even a negative message that sticks with us.
absolutely.
Something that some name that somebody called me in elementary, I could still remember,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember the compliment
Right.
I got 10 minutes ago.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we're wounded so quickly and so easily. And that's the other thing. Once we're communicating in a way that doesn't honor the other person, what happens is that you become an unsafe person for them to communicate with. And then they're not able to trust you. And so, trust is built up over time. It takes a long time, but oh boy, it can vanish in an instant
yeah.
if we're treated badly, right? If we're treated badly, it's like, whoa, I don't know that I can trust that person anymore. They are unsafe.
Yeah. Yeah. So my quick question, because I know we got a lot to touch
Yeah.
on. When emotion is involved,
Yeah.
how can you keep that from screaming or saying something without thinking? What do
Yeah.
you do in that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually just spoke with a client about that this week. And we are emotional beings. And so
Yeah.
I want people to understand that God gave us our emotions for a reason. We can use them in a healthy way or not. So what I tell the couples that I work with, and even the individual clients that I work with, if you are in a disagreement with someone, or there's a conflict or even a confrontation, again, you can control how you're responding. And so if you're feeling like, uh-oh, I'm going to blow in a minute, take some deep breaths. That will help de-escalate. Another option would be to ask for a timeout and walk away from the situation for about 10 minutes to gather your thoughts, and then come back. And there's an agreement of, okay, we need 10 minutes. Let's just walk away from this, go outside if you can, take a walk. A change of scenery or environment may help. And it will de-escalate. One thing that I did, and I didn't yell at this person or anything, but she was being really rude to me. And this was at church a number of years ago. She was being horrible to me, and she was coming at me and attacking me. And in the moment, I knew what my trigger was. I was so triggered by it. And what I said to her, she was not even a friend. She was just, something had happened and she decided to take it out on me. And I just looked at her and I said, I'm feeling triggered right now. And I think it would be best to stop this conversation, just like that. And so if you can do that, if you recognize you're being triggered and it's going to escalate, you can just say, look, I'm feeling triggered and I really don't want this to escalate. So I think I need to take a few minutes to walk away, and then take some deep breaths, collect your thoughts, and come back.
Yeah, that's great. I know when it wasn't necessarily in the heat of the moment, but I've had some moments where I've needed to have a discussion with somebody where I knew the words, just as soon as I started saying it, would evoke emotion.
Right.
So I've always prayed before. I said, Lord, please calm my heart when I go into this. Please let me communicate effectively and get this message across to this person.
Yeah.
And then one thing I also do is I just write down bullet points. I don't go into the conversation with a cue card,
right?
But just writing those down helps me remember.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when I get into that discussion with this person and I get heated again, all those things that I wanted to touch on, I did it, and it just was the
Yeah.
surface level argument that started the whole thing. And I go,
Right.
well, I never got into the thing. So I know
Right.
that kind of helps me
Yeah.
myself to do those. So
Yeah, those are great. Those are great things to do, bullet pointing so that you don't forget what you want to touch on. Another thing that I want our listeners to know is this. How are you coming into the discussion? How are you, presenting? How are you coming in? What's the intention? What's your motivation? Right. So conflict is such a heated word for people. They don't like conflict. They don't like confrontation because the idea is that someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. Well, that's a problem in a relationship. Right. So how the Lord has shown it to me is this. A conflict or a confrontation indicates that there's a disconnection. And so both parties need to be willing to come together and reconnect, right? So whether it's in marriage, a friendship, a work situation, there's a disconnect. The purpose is to reconnect. It means there's a misunderstanding somewhere. All right. And that means we need to work that out. The intention here is for both people to come out of it winning. Not one losing and not one winning, because that's a horrible place to be. So if you come in with that mindset, I'm going to win this fight no matter what, I'm going to win this argument no matter what. Well, okay, you might win it, but in the end, what are you really losing?
Yeah.
Right. And so really taking that into consideration, that relationships are priceless. And so it isn't about beating someone up. It isn't about being right. It is about, knowing what happened here. Where did the disconnection happen? And so now two hearts are coming together to reconnect. And because you want to preserve that relationship. Now, if you want to destroy it, that's another story, and we need to talk about that. But in day-to-day life, right, you want to preserve those relationships and see how the Lord is going to move in them.
Okay. All right. For those just tuning in, this is True You Ministries with Stacy Echeverria. She is your pastoral counselor. Please call her. She gives a free 20-minute consultation. So if you got some issues you want to work on, she'll help. She's the one to call and reach out. 626-461-3344 or email info@trueyouministries.com. And we are doing a Q&A episode coming up soon. So we encourage all our listeners out there to please email your question to info@trueyouministries.com. Now, so getting into the teaching and counseling aspect, I got to ask, what does it mean to communicate?
Well, in a nutshell, communication means to have mutual understanding, which now we know that can be really challenging, right? Especially in a coupleship, in a marriage, right? Men and women are wired so very differently. And so that means you really have to work at it. So it takes work, right? So there's going to be understanding because there's some things that are at play here. And one is that we're communicating through our own pain filters. Like when I was talking with my husband and I would get triggered because I felt like, okay, he wasn't listening. He's not hearing me. And he's asking this question. And if he had been listening, he wouldn't need to ask the question. I was feeling upset about it because of my own wounding around that. So then this can lead, so if we're communicating through our own pain filters, it can lead to inaccurately imparting what we want to say. So the message isn't the issue, it's how one delivers it. It's how it's delivered, right? And then we receive what we hear through our own pain filters as well. And so this can lead to misunderstanding. So also, half listening to the message and acting as if you heard the message in its entirety, it will delay in getting the issues resolved. So we hear and we communicate through our pain filters. And then, we're half listening to the message, not really being present, not really being there. And so if you're at a place where you're like, I can't even listen to this, don't just sit there and nod like, got it, kind of thing. Be honest about it. And I will tell my husband, I'll tell him, hey, babe, I really want to hear what you have to say, but I just don't have the capacity right now because I'm just burned out. Is it all right if we talk about it when I'm feeling more fresh in the morning, or, that's respectful. That communicates what I believe, that what you want to share is important, and I want to be able to be fully present to hear it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So what are the different types of communication styles?
Yeah, so verbally, in the words that we speak, that's one way, right? It's to be understood with our words. We need to be clear on what we want to impart, and specific in the words that we use. So if we're using generalizations and expecting the other person to be a mind reader and figure out exactly what we want to say, I'll say we need to get better at the words that we're using. Okay. And then there's body language and nonverbal communication. Oh, yeah. So with my clients, I always, crossing the arms, right? Crossing the arms across, right? Crossing the arms means I'm not open to this.
Yeah.
I'm just not open to this, but I'm here. Yeah. But you're really not. So the body language and the nonverbal communication, I always listen for what my clients are not telling me in terms of verbal. I'll look. It tells me everything, tells me so much more. And so those are the two ways, right? Verbal and nonverbal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listen for what's not being said, or listen for what is not being spoken.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Boy, this is such an important topic, and we have so much more to cover.
Yeah.
We are going to make a part 2.
Yeah.
So make sure everybody tunes in for the second part of this effective communication, not just communication, because as we learn, there's bad communication as well. Exactly. So effective communication. But before we leave, I know you like to end every show with a call to salvation. What would you say to somebody right now who's listening that doesn't know Jesus?
Yes. So Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is. And whatever you are struggling with, he has an answer for. He has a way out of it. He has a way through it. If you're thinking about it, if you're considering it, today's the day to take action, because we don't know when he's going to be returning again. So today is the day to allow the Savior to be in your life, part of your life, walking with you through all the trials and tribulations that life has, and knowing that you're not alone in this world. Your friends may leave you, your family may disown you, but Jesus never will. He says that he will never leave you nor forsake you. So today's the day to make that decision. And if you'd like to talk about it, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with anyone that has questions about accepting Jesus and what does that mean for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you for providing so much information on communication. Mm-hmm. I love the story of you, talking with your husband and saying, can we revisit this? I'm just burnt out. It reminds me of, and it stuck with me years and years ago. One of my friends was arguing with his girlfriend at the time on the phone, and he was really calm. And he said really calmly to her, he said, "Honey, I think, it's around lunch. Have you had lunch yet?" And she said, "No." And he said, "I think maybe you're a little bit hungry. So how about this? How about you go have your lunch? And after you've had your lunch and relax a little bit, then let's talk about this." Mm-hmm. And that really stuck with me.
I love it.
Yeah. How calm he was about it. And so the story about with you and your husband, it just shows respect too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That, it's not, that's a waste of time and effort to communicate when you're not ready to communicate.
Exactly.
And you might, do something that makes them feel like that person that's talking to you, like you said, they may not come to you in the future because you, ignored them, just, so that's a great takeaway is, make sure that you're in the right mindset for communication.
Absolutely.
So this, like I said, this is going to be a 2-parter, and we're going to be back for an episode 2 of effective communication. But before we leave, I want to also let people know that Stacy is available for a free 20-minute consultation. Mm-hmm. So please give Stacy a call at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344, or email info@trueyouministries.com. We are going to do a Q&A episode coming up real soon. So we're asking all our listeners, please send your questions to Stacy at info@trueyouministries.com. And it can be any topic, something that we haven't even covered yet. So we're looking forward to those emails, and Stacy's looking forward to answering those questions. Mm-hmm. So thanks again, Stacy, and everybody tune in for part 2, because we've got a lot more to cover here on effective communication.
Yep.
And I hope that I know some things that you listen today will motivate you to take steps to change for everlasting change in your life. So until next time, God bless. You've been listening to True You Ministries with pastoral counselor Stacy Echeverria. Stacy is a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught her the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. You can learn more about Stacy and her heartfelt desire to help people, much like yourself, who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling her at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344. Or feel free to email her at info@trueyouministries.com. That email once again is info@trueyouministries.com. Thank you for tuning into today's show, and we'll see you next week at the same time. And may God richly bless you.